We've made it to July on the homestead. We finally have everything planted in the garden, and there's this sort of lull that happens. And believe me, after a very full spring, getting all of your gardens sorted, your seeds started, everything transplanted out, the last thing you want to keep doing right now is planting. Starting seeds, going through your seed catalog, deciding how many frost-free days you have left and how long it might take for you to get one more crop of beets in there or another round of pole beans or bush beans into the soil. I get it. I'm in the same boat. But in like 80 days from now, you will be really, really thankful that you've gotten these 3 or 4 crops going so that you have a fall harvest. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Melanie. Hello, hey, hi, and welcome. If it is your first time here, hit the subscribe button so you can hang out with us here on the homestead as we develop and build our gardens and all of the other fun things we get up to. I've taken a bit of a break from garden content, just a few days really, but it feels longer than that after such an intensive planting spring season. We went fishing, I shared with you guys our kind of adventure down to the coast, which was awesome, but now it is July, and in order to make sure I have a fall harvest coming in, I have to get my succession planting done and some more seeds into the soil. It's important to note, I live in the mountains, and I have a pretty short growth season, so what I'm planting now needs to be ready and harvestable in roughly 80 days or less. There's a few things to consider when you're planning to succession plant in your garden. First would be, where are you going to put more seeds if your garden is already full? The way my season works, because we're at 2,200 feet in the mountains, okay, arugula, that's enough out of you. The way my season works is that I basically have an opportunity early in the spring to plant cold tolerant crops, and then my succession plant is another round of cold tolerant crops because I go from cold to hot to cold so quickly. So for me, I tend to just replant similar or same crops in the garden space that I'm taking things out of. So for example, as you can see, the arugula in this bed has started to go to flower. There's all these seed pods, and I might actually be able to save some seeds from this plant and then just direct sow them right back in the same area. Another good crop to consider doing this with would be things like sweet peas. Sweet peas do fairly well in cool weather, so if you start them now, you should be able to get another harvest going off of some sweet pea plants before your first frost happens. This is my first pea of the summer. So exciting. Oh, they're so cute. I know it's a little weird to be considering what you're going to be harvesting right before it starts to frost and winter is coming in the middle of July. It's not always fun to think that far ahead, and it might damper the joy of the July season just a tad bit. When your first frost date is right around the corner, you will be happy that the July you thought about this. Another thing I'm going to be starting again will be a bunch of different lettuce varieties as well as spinach. Spinach is way better performing and grows way better in cool weather. As you can see, all of my spinach has gone to seed. I have managed to eat off of it for a while, but I definitely need to get another round of spinach going in this garden for a fall harvest. Depending on how old your garden is or how long you've been growing certain varieties in specific areas, you might want to switch the crops up. So say you're replanting more radishes and more lettuce. Just make sure you switch where you planted them in your garden. That way, you can still utilize the empty space from harvesting those crops and reseed without taking the exact same nutrients out of that soil. If you're someone who composts and amends your soil fairly regularly, or if they are in raised beds that you use fertilizers in, you don't have to worry about this as much because you are putting a lot of nutrients back in the soil. It is something that you want to keep in the back of your mind though, just for the longevity of your soil health. We're up in the salad gardens near the house, and we do have things like Swiss chard, some kale back there, spinach, and other lettuce varieties. But I already have a succession planting of these going in the high tunnel. So let's go down there and take a look at the starts that are coming up. Down here in the high tunnel, we have quite a few things that I've recently direct sowed and are just starting to come up. I choose to do my succession planting in the high tunnel because my season is so short. So if I need to extend my season a little longer in order to harvest these crops, I have the protection of the high tunnel just to give me a bit more of a buffer for my first frost date. Down here in this corner we have bok choy. Bok choy is an extremely cold tolerant variety of a leafy Asian green. There's pak choy, bok choy, anything in that kind of Asian green family is a great option to get started in July. Beets can take as little as 60 days to be ready to harvest, so this is a great crop to direct sow in July. I've planted more kohlrabi out in the high tunnel as well, as it is also a cold tolerant crop and a great thing to have closer to the fall harvesting dates. We've gotten another variety of pea going down here in the high tunnel. Again, this is a hardy, cold tolerant variety, and we'll be able to be harvesting these peas right up until our first frost date. As these scallions are just finishing off, you can see that there's a bunch of radishes that are just starting to pop up in this area. Radish, of course, is a very fast growing crop and a perfect option for something to get going in July. I showed you some of the beets that we direct sowed in the high tunnel, but let's take a look at the beets that have been growing since our spring planting, and another option to get beets going for a succession crop here in July. This is one area of the garden where beets have been growing now for about 3 or 4 weeks. They're doing great, and there's actually a few varieties in this bed. While these beets are still a few weeks out from actually bulbing up and being able to harvest, I have direct sown some already, and I've had some started in modules for a few weeks now. Depending on how long your grow season is, I would recommend having a few different stages of starts happening all of the time. So having something direct sown, the germination might be a little bit more unpredictable. So I will direct sow, and I will also get some seeds started in modules. That way I know that I will be able to fill in the gaps for the direct sowed, and if something doesn't come up, I can kind of even out my spacing and make sure I'm not wasting any space. But I also have some guarantee starts to put out into the garden in case of all of my seeds that are direct sown fall prey to pests or simply don't germinate. This way I know that I will be able to have a continuous harvest of these root crops come the end of the summer months and into the fall. It's also a fun way to sneak in different varieties. What I've started in this module here, these are golden beets, and I don't actually have them in the garden yet. So having them started here and replacing my beets later on when they're done will actually give me an opportunity to have a few different varieties without losing the bulk of harvest space out of the garden, if that makes sense. I get more beet variety for my efforts, which is important to me. Of course, there are quite a few other root crops that you can do the exact same method with. So I'll show you the rutabagas that I have going on. There was some that I direct sowed right at our last frost date, so first thing in the spring, and then I planted a few out that I had started in these modules. You'll see the difference, and you'll be able to imagine how much sooner I'll be harvesting the ones that have been going since spring, and then the ones that I've planted out later on. As you can see, right behind the leeks, there are quite a few rutabagas that are fairly developed and growing quite fast. But just past those rutabagas are a bunch that are just maybe 2-3 inches high that have only recently been planted out. This way I'll be having rutabagas that are at the harvesting size 3 or 4 weeks apart. I get to extend my harvest time and really have some vegetables closer to my first frost date and extend my grow season. I know that you are probably tired. You're probably covered in dirt and have hair like me right now, and being told to get out into your garden in the middle of the July heat and keep planting might not be what you want to hear. But trust me, it's something that I have tried to adopt every year, planting a little bit more and just kind of keep that seed starting momentum going. You, in about 80 days, a few weeks, maybe even a couple months from now, will be very thankful that the July version of you kept on keeping on, even if you were hot and tired. As a bit of a recap, a few of the things that I like to keep planting in July would be any crop that is fairly cold tolerant. So the same things that you plant early in the spring are also good really late in the fall. Things like sweet peas, root crops like beets, rutabagas, turnips, radishes, they're all great to get a succession planting going now. It might be hard to find the space in your garden to get these seeds in the ground or to transplant out starts that you have in your greenhouses, but it's worth the effort. Try to imagine what finishes first in your garden. So for example, if you have a bunch of summer squash that you know you're going to be taking out long before your first frost date, I would suggest putting in some radish seeds around them. So by the time the radish seeds have germinated and are starting to grow and they need that sun and that energy and the water and the soil's nutrients, your summer squash is out of the way. Interplanting around things like tomatoes or tomatillos or pepper plants is also a great option. Even things like your cucumbers. If you have things that are on trellises, that means that they aren't actually taking a lot of space on the soil surface. It's a perfect spot to put a few lettuces, maybe a couple turnips, or even more radishes. On that note, I have to go plant some more bok choy. I've got to get those beets in the ground, so I will leave it there for today. If this video has reminded you to keep planting and given you a little bit of motivation, if you could smash that like button for me, I would greatly appreciate it. If you're into what we're doing here on the channel, I would love for you to subscribe and follow along. As always, I will be back here very shortly with another video. May the force be with you. Bye-bye for now.